It is wonderful to chat and catch up with one another. I appreciate all of you doing that. I'm going to quickly, I think, introduce all these lovely people who are a part of our panel today. We heard from Doug Brouwer last week, a bit about his pilgrimage, and he brought a couple more books. If you weren't able to pick one up last week and are interested in the traveling path, you could pick that up today, talk to Doug. Then I'll introduce our panel, individuals who have done various treks, pilgrimages on various pathways, and they're going to talk about them today. Phil Doeschot on the far end, the Reverend Phil Doeschot. And Phil, I know, has done portions of the AT. He'll talk about that. And Marlin Vis has done, I know, at least part of or has done the Camino. And maybe others talk about that. And Larry Mulder, we know, started all the AT adventures that our youth have been on. And did you do part of the Pacific Coast Crest as well? Yep, and Bob and Susanne Jordan have done on the Camino as well. Each of them doing different things as a part of that, and they will talk about those things today. My question, when we get to the Q&A part, my question is going to be, as someone who has not done a pilgrimage, but has certainly done a lot of trail hiking, scariest thing I encountered was a bear, mama bear and her cub. And then came around a corner in the Rocky Mountains upon a whole herd of moose, and I didn't know I was supposed to be afraid. But the ranger that I talked to later said, "Oh, you were very lucky that they didn't attack you." I was like, "Oh, wow, yeah, I am thankful for that." So my question is for each of you would be, what's the scariest thing you have encountered as you're walking? So thank you, and Doug is going to moderate our panel today.
Thank you, Jane. I think I'm mic'd. Well, it's good to see you. Thanks for being part of part 2 of our series on pilgrimage. As I said last week, to give pilgrimage the broadest possible definition, it's going somewhere and then looking for meaning in the experience. And I even gave a couple of examples last time of secular pilgrimage, which you may or may not have accepted. But anyway, I attempted to give as broad a definition as possible. And then later in the conversation, in the discussion time, questions surfaced again about what exactly is a pilgrimage. And I think that is a good way to enter today's conversation. We're going to have some discussion back and forth on exactly what a pilgrimage amounts to. I suspect that the panelists are going to talk about their own experiences, and you may want to quiz them about what exactly a pilgrimage means to them. The plan this morning is to have 3 rounds of questions. I'll ask a question and then let everyone address it. The first question is, how did you get ready for this? How did you set an intention? What happened before you left your front door? The second question is, please tell us about the experience itself. What happened? What are some high points? And then, as Jane said, what were the scary moments? That would be fine too. I didn't see any bears, but maybe those of you who hike the AT have seen some scary animals. And then finally, the third question would be, what were your takeaways, the immediate impressions you had from your experience, but then also long-term reflections. How did this experience change you in the long term? As you may have heard last time, I walked the Camino Frances in 2019. And then last October, I went to Portugal to walk the Portuguese portion of the Camino. But we all have different pilgrimage experience, so let's get started. First of all, and I guess I don't care who goes first, we don't have to go one after the other, but please tell us how you prepared for your walk. In your case, maybe walk and ride.
So I think we were invited by Marlin and Sally Vis to do a Camino because it was not on our radar. We kind of heard about it before, but we liked bicycling a lot and thought, why walk that far? But at the invitation of the Visses, it sounded like something fun. I wasn't necessarily looking for a spiritual experience, but I wanted to do this for the adventure of it. And if something spiritual arose out of it, that'd be great. But it wasn't what I was looking for. I think the three things that I tried to prepare for was getting an idea of what it was by watching Martin Sheen's movie, The Way, which made the first day a little more extra scary. And also trying Duolingo, and that didn't work out. I just depended on Marlin's translations of Spanish for me. And the third thing is doing walking here and trying to get up to walking more than 10 miles a day to avoid blisters on the trail.
I guess I just want to reiterate what Bob said about the fact that we didn't really set out to have this be a spiritual pilgrimage. And I feel a little bit embarrassed to admit that, especially because there's some higher meaning going on with some of these other folks up here. But we were just looking to have fun and to do something hard in order to experience the accomplishments of that.
Yeah, I'll take this one. Thank you. Yeah, I have been an obsessive person. And after I lived obsessively for sailing until 1979, I turned my obsession to backpacking. I started that by doing several weeks in the Colorado Mountains and Colorado Outward Bound course. After which I talked to my 11-year-old son, Michael, saying, hey, would you like to go on a walk in the woods with me? He said, I'll do that. So we walked for 10 years. And every year we went to 2 or 3 different weeks of the Appalachian Trail until he got to the point where he went off to college and I needed to find some other people to feed my habit. Ergo, High Hopes Fish Club kids. And they were all sitting there waiting, they were expectant. And so I got them to go with me, not on a pilgrimage, but on an adventure. Late in the winter, each year, I would send them these kinds of notices. This was before the internet, and I had them think about going on the trail, and yeah, every year, an awful lot of them did. And we got together in the spring and took a lot of practice hikes to get ready for this. I asked them and told them and ordered them to do a lot of Pisgah stair steps, which I know Jim Pierce did a lot of. I did some of them. I'm not sure the kids did many at all. But they did well anyhow. And after that, along with Ann McKnight and Gordon and several other adults, we took these 11 and 12-year-old kids for 26 years on the Appalachian Trail each month.
So I'm Marlin, and I think we prepared quite simply. We walked a lot. Most days, and then on the weekend we would set out for a longer walk, 15 miles, 17 miles, and that's how we prepared. In terms of spirituality, I actually did think this would be a spiritual experience, but I didn't think of it in terms of Christian terms. I thought of it in much broader terms, times for contemplation, times to be in nature, times to be with people that I care about and people that care about me, about difficult times, climbing and going down. And these are spiritual moments that don't translate into religion, but warm the heart and clear the mind. And so the serendipitous part of that was the churches. Very much enjoyed going into these village churches, which were big churches, and seeing the imagery there, because most of them were Catholic. In fact, I think they were almost all Catholic. And seeing the images in there and whether the art was good art or not, trying to figure out what the artist was trying to write, because these are icons, they're written, they're not painted, and the artist is trying to make a statement. And so we would, Sally and I and the Jordans and Leanne too, would try and figure out what exactly this artist was trying to say about this event. Some of them were quite interesting and moving, but one of the things that, one of the impressions that came to me that I don't know that I've ever had before is how violent Christianity is. I mean, you go in these churches and the images and the history that is recorded in these icons. I mean, the violence is really hard to grasp. But that was the blood. Yeah, so.
I'm Phil. Sort of like the Jordans, we were sitting at dinner with you guys, and you said, hey, we're thinking about doing the Camino. And I went, well, and you obviously knew we were hikers already. We've already had our bear experience in Colorado with Mama and her cubs. And so the thought of spending 500 miles on the trail was daunting. It would have been with you. That may be Marlin had already been retired. I was moving into retirement at that point, and there was a much different agenda in my mind in that part of the world, in my brain. That's a world maybe you don't want to go into, but I understand. When you retire, and I'm probably speaking to the choir here, there is an adjustment to life that isn't the same as the posters for vacations and cruise ships seem to depict. There's a whole transition that you go through in retirement that is not easily walked, and it's a place that sometimes we probably need more guides than we thought to transition. And one of the things that was evident in my life at that point was that I needed to have a space to process what retirement was going to be. I already launched into retirement. COVID had come. That certainly was transformative, but it was also more crisis-inducing in my life than transformative. I got grandchildren during COVID. My life changed entirely. So there were some things that were important to me to do in walking. I was also deeply influenced in preparation. You will laugh at this, but Bill Bryson, if you know anything about Bill, if you're an Iowan, you know who Bill Bryson is. For some of you, you laugh because the only thing you know about Bill Bryson is the funny movie done in about 10 years ago called A Walk in the Woods. But Bryson's a pretty serious author, which explores things, but he does it from sort of that Midwestern kind of, aw shucks, I'm just taking a trip and I'll throw something in kind of way of writing. And so Bryson's book was the first thing. And then the book Wild, which I know was mentioned last week, is also a transformative piece. And then I have a friend called David Phillips, and David is a RCA minister, now retired in the Minneapolis area, and David would always take me to the mountains every year. We'd traditionally go to the Leadville area and spend a week walking and processing. But I knew for this trip, I took my wife along, but I dropped her off each day, or she dropped me off each day, and I walked alone because I needed to be alone.
Wow, thank you. I think that was terrific. I did not spend a great deal of time with well, any of the panelists except Larry to prepare for this, so I'm enjoying listening to them as much as you are. So this, and just so you know, I had a seminary classmate who told me about the Camino. He walked it, and so my preparation was mainly walking long distances too before setting out. Let's move into the second question, and that is, what were some of the high points of the experience for you? And then if you want to tell us about the dangerous moments or the low points, that would be terrific too. But what happened to you along the way?
I think one of the points, I wouldn't call it a high point, but it's part of the experience, is that every day there was some discomfort, sometime, or maybe all the time for that day. It could have been gnats, the heat, hunger, thirst. At some point in the day, it's going to hit you that way. On our second Camino, the Portuguese Camino with the Visses, we were out for 13 or 14 days. The first day was sunny. The next 6 days in a row had rain. And some of those days it was cold and very windy, and there was discomfort. But that's balanced off by the fact of the camaraderie of being with your fellow pilgrims. We were all in the same rain. And at the end of the day, we didn't do albergues, we did hotels, which meant there was a warm shower. And we also had food and cervezas. And the discussion at that time was fantastic. So it was always a highlight at the end of the day.
I think another feature of the experience itself is experiencing a culture and a place slowly. You know, you're in a car or in a plane or a train and you look out the window and you see the landscape go by quickly. But when you're walking, you're experiencing it up close and personal. And that goes for the nature, the landscape, the scenery, as well as interactions with people along the way. And those were some of our most precious times, I think, to meet fellow pilgrims and hear their story and be present in their experience, as well as meet people in the communities that we went through. Now, we are not Spanish speakers, so that limited us, of course. But I remember, for example, on the day that we were going to Osobrero, and that's a high village on the top of a mountain. So if you're walking, you have to climb. And we were on bikes then, and if you're biking in that kind of landscape, it means you're pushing your bike up the hill. So that was a difficult day, and we were on our way up a very steep portion of road. We weren't on the Camino itself then because it just wasn't conducive to bicycling. So we were on a road that took us to the same location that we were headed toward. And we were pushing our bikes up this hill because it was so steep we couldn't ride. And a guy approached us from the front, coming toward us, and he stopped and he rolled down his window, and he didn't speak any English, but he somehow communicated to us that we were going the wrong direction. And we understood what he was saying, and so we turned around and went back down the hill and found the place that we needed to go. And we think back on that gentleman, and he didn't need to do that. He could have just gone on and thought to himself, well, those suckers are going the wrong way. But he instead engaged with us in such a lovely way. And I think that was one of the things that we experienced day after day is just the kindness of people that we met, which was great. It encouraged us. I think that another thing that encouraged us on some of the hard parts of the day was just a sense of humor. And that was what was kind of fun with walking with friends, because we would develop these inside jokes that would just keep us going. On day one, Doug talked last week about crossing the Pyrenees on day one, and that was a very difficult day. It's it's out of the gate, and you don't really know what to expect, and it's a long day. I don't remember exactly how many miles, but it's a long day of walking. And everywhere we went, there were herds of cattle. And in Spain, the cows all wear cowbells. So everywhere we went, we heard this, background noise of cowbells out in the pastures. And when we were flagging, our energy was flagging, and we felt like, oh, I don't know if I can continue going, we would talk about that SNL sketch from decades back about the cowbells. And somebody would say something like, fellas, we just need more cowbells. And we would all bust out laughing, and it would just kind of keep us going. So that was something that was encouraged us to along the way. And that's all I'll say for now.
I agree with you. Some of those days seemed really slow and long. And Ann and Jim and I and several others tried to lead these kids, but often it was a push. And some of the push was rather easy, and some of it was quite difficult. But I think over the years, the AT hike became sort of a rite of passage for Hope Church kids. Some of them never went, but an awful lot of them went the first year and the second year and the third year. They experienced exhaustion, experienced fear, a lot of fun, some heights, some boulder hopping, some wet days, some wet nights. We heard some comments like this: I didn't want to come on this stupid hike. My mom and dad made me do it. Usually one or two in every year would do that. I didn't think I'd make it, but I did. I never saw a view like this. Maybe I'll through hike the AT someday. And by the way, two of the Hope Church kids did. Rachel Smith and Lindsay Reimer did through hike the entire trail. The best thing to hear was, I'm going again next year. In 1999, I only had 100 miles, 100-mile wilderness to go to finish the AT, and my son Michael came back to hike that last 100 miles with me, which was a wonderful thing for him to do and for us to do it together. I got to the top of Mount Katahdin, and I looked to the northeast, and guess what? There were no more markers. There was no more trail. I was done. Except my session wasn't quite over, because after that, I came back and we hiked for another 10 years with Fish Called Kids every year until 2012, when Karen and I changed directions and went west, and we ended up hiking about 400 miles of the Pacific Crest Trail. That's all I have for now.
Well, it's hard to think about a high point, because it was all high points for us, I think, really. Every day was something new. We formed a bond with the Jordans and with Leanne will be lifelong, even though neither one of us would say we're necessarily best friends or we hang out together. There's a bond in doing this that we laughed a lot. I mean, I don't know if you know the Van Dyke twins very well, but they laugh a lot and heartily, and they're funny. And Bob is the perfect foil for all of that. So, I mean, really, Sally would agree, I don't think we've ever laughed so much in our entire life, is that first 200 miles. We just laughed a lot. So Mary was a high point for me. I love Mary. Mary is one of my favorite characters in literature. I'm talking about Jesus' mother, Mary, for lots of reasons. I love Mary. I admire Mary. And she's everywhere. She's more prominent there than Jesus, by far. And not just there. We found the same thing was true in Jerusalem and other places as well. And I think on that, I think part of that is because she's all human. And where we've divinized Jesus, rightly so, I'm not talking about whether he's Lord or not. I don't care to get into that discussion. But we think about Jesus always in that sense, whereas Mary is one of us. And so I think that's what appeals to people, especially people who have struggled, people who have suffered, especially women. So Mary was everywhere, and she was a high point for me. Quickly, we went through a little village, and there was a little church down below, Church of Mary. We went in, there was an older woman sitting there, and as soon as we came in, she welcomed us, and then she gave us these miracle medals, and I lost it. I left it in a hotel. Otherwise, I'd show it to you. And she put it on our necks, and then she blessed us. And in Spanish, we don't know what she said, except it was a Mary blessing. And it was a profound experience for both of us, I think, for me anyway. And I think Sal would say the same thing. She's here. And we were together that whole way. And that was another high point. Going with the Jordans and Leanne for the first 200 miles, that was great. I mean, it was so helpful. They were so helpful to us. They waited for us. We were always behind them. And we told them, just go. But they never did just go. We'd go over a hill and we'd see them waiting for us. Or they'd be at a coffee place and they'd save us a table. And so, but then we walked the last 300 miles, just the two of us. And that was special too. That's unforgettable. And every day, just the two of us walking the trail, something pure about it, something hard. It was hard. And we could say to our kids, and we said to one of the reasons we went to Jerusalem is we wanted to leave a legacy to our kids that you can do hard things. And so this is another thing we wanted to be able to say to our kids and grandkids, you can do hard things. You can do more than you think you can do. It's just a matter of that first step out the door and then walking and one foot in front of the other. And so that's a rambling kind of a thing, but that question's almost impossible to answer. A high point. There were so many.
Whereas all of those folks speak from the heart, I'm aware of a guy who needs my notes. I chose to go in November because I thought the trail would be quiet, and it was. Most of the day hikers are long gone. Most of the through hikers, I did the section that started in Pennsylvania and ended in West Virginia, close to DC, was past the point where through hikers were walking. There were no through hikers during that time. And so it was very much alone. I would literally spend almost the whole day without ever seeing anyone. And that was good for me. You know, I know many of you are relational people. Spending a whole day by yourself would probably drive you crazy. I understand that. I'm partially that at times. But I'm an introvert, and I had inside work to do. And it was very difficult to do that in conversation. And so I needed to have the quiet because there was an internal conversation that continued to talk. And sometimes after you hear yourself long enough, over and over again, you'll stop talking and begin to simply have the silence in which other voices, I know you're going to get nervous now, other voices begin to speak into you. And I think that was part of what happened in the AT. I was surprised at how easy it was. I guess I was shocked because I was very nervous about mountains, I'm a flatland guy, grew up in Nebraska, live in, outside of St. Louis. I've known nothing but plains. And so hiking, I assumed it was going to be difficult. And going downhill was always difficult for a man in his 70s with his knees. Those things don't go as well. But I never thought it was hard. But the silence was really good for me. And so the highlight for me wasn't so much conversations had, but for the silence necessary to do what I was needing to do during that time. Not sure that's a pilgrimage, but as you said last week, sometimes the stepping, the walking is just the invitation to do work that has to be done only in that environment.
Wow, thank you. This is really good. I'm grateful for your responses to that. There are some similarities to my experience, and then I've heard some things that would be new to me, so thank you. I mentioned last time that the high point for me was the meeting pilgrims from all over the world, but I did spend 10 days to 2 weeks in silence. Not everybody has a month to give to this, so often pilgrims join the path, I don't know, halfway through, or at least within 100 miles of Santiago de Compostela. So anyway, the first 10 days to 2 weeks, in my experience, were by myself, and I think Phil recognized the importance of spending that alone time. One quick anecdote about that, I took some podcasts along. I thought, well, I'm going to be walking by myself. I need to hear. Big mistake. I even took along a sermon to listen to on Sunday morning. I quickly deleted all of that because I was missing too much. There I was with the sounds and the smells, and oh my goodness, the last thing I needed was to hear a voice in my ears. Well, let's move on to the third question, your takeaways, both the immediate ones and then ones you're still reflecting on long after what you did.
I think being in nature and seeing other pilgrims were the big highlights. There were interesting people along the way. 4 guys from Ireland that were Gaelic football players, and getting my picture taken with those guys was a highlight. And people like that would just come up and talk to you and be very friendly. Seeing 5 other guys that were carrying someone in a wheelchair along the whole Camino. And we made a comment to them that it was so nice they were doing this for this gentleman in the wheelchair. And they said, he's giving us so much more than what we're giving him. It was a highlight. Meeting Bonnie, who Marlin and Sally had more extensive conversations with her, a woman who was newly widowed and decided to do this for her trip. And hundreds of other people like that, I think, were on the Camino. We heard some other stories, but I can't help but believe that there's more. Seeing the pile of rocks that people had carried to leave their burden behind was a good memory.
Yeah, I think a takeaway that we experienced at the time was sort of challenging ourselves to be a little more humble about the way we interacted with, judged others who were on the trail as well. Let me explain. There's a certain amount of judgmental thinking among Camino pilgrims, even if they're on it for a spiritual reason. People who viewed Bob and I, for example, as walking the first 200 miles, then we took a bus 100 miles, and then we biked the last 200 miles. Well, we're not really doing the Camino. We would look at people in the last 100 miles from Sarria to Santiago de Compostela. Those are the 100 miles that you have to do in order to get your Compostela at the end, which is this piece of paper that declares that you completed the Camino. So, you know, we come to Sarria after having done all these other miles, and we see these people with new shoes on and, you know, new backpacks, and they're just starting out to do the last 100 miles. And it was like, oh, sheesh, those are not real pilgrims. So Bob and I, our group, we booked with a company that carried our luggage forward, and so we didn't have to do what Doug did, carry everything on his back. And I know that there are some that judged us for that. So what I'm saying is that even these people, even those of us in this community that are doing this thing, that in some ways should be supporting each other no matter what, interjected some of these judgments on the way others were doing it. And we were aware of that at the time, and we kind of had to continually rein ourselves in, and kind of came up with this phrase, everybody's Camino is their own Camino. So there's no one right or wrong way to do it. So that was something that we kind of had to work on at the time that we were doing it. I think in terms of a longer takeaway, I think that we continue to be drawn to these kinds of adventures. 2 years after we did the Camino Francis, we did the Portuguese Camino. We did a hiking trek in Slovenia in between those two things. Yeah, we're just continually keeping our eyes and ears open to do these kinds of challenging experiences that echo that we can do hard things. And I think that another thing that we just have taken away is what Marlin reflected, just these bonds that we have with the people that we hiked with, an appreciation of that kind of friendship. Yeah.
Thanks. I understand a little bit about your elitist thoughts on some things. My next obsession was bicycling, and I did a lot of it, and I got to the point where when I saw somebody that had straight handlebars on their bike instead of drop bars, they were not real bicyclers. But anyway, the takeaways on the Appalachian Trail. I had a wonderful son and wife who obsessed with me for an awful lot of years. I used to go on these hikes almost every year on my wife's birthday, the middle of June. And I got to the point where I had beforehand I had to stack up presents so that each day that I was gone, she had a present for her birthday. But she kept saying, you got to do your thing, Larry. You're obsessed, and you have to deal with your obsession, which I did. I had 150 really cool kids and leaders who shared this adventure with me. Ann and Jim and Gordon and Marty Wick, I saw him here this morning. These people were really close to me, and we all love that part of the trail together. God blessed us on these hikes. We went through the whole 26 years with very, very few injuries. Lots of blisters, lots of sore bodies, but nothing more than that. By 2012, I discovered that I'd slept on the ground enough. And I really stopped hiking and transferred into bicycling. But I guess when all is said and done, one of the most incredible takeaways I've had of this hike is that I learned how to poop in the woods.
I wasn't expecting that one, no.
There are lots. I'll just give you, I think I'm just going to give you one, is that I had pain on the trip. It started first day almost, but it didn't start until I was like 13, 14 miles in. So I'd only have 2 miles left of pain. But then the further we went, and then when Sally and I were alone, I'd get 2-3 miles in and the pain would start. And it was pretty intense pain. And one of the takeaways I have is there are people who go through every day with chronic pain and how exhausting that is, physically, mentally, emotionally, how dependent you are. Sally carried the pack. Sally's a horse, by the way. And I say that in the most affectionate. That is a compliment. She is a horse. She just goes, and she's tough. And she would carry the pack and I just couldn't carry it anymore. And how that bothered me when we'd stop at coffee shops. I'd be putting the pack on her, and then all these people sitting around, and I'd be like, no, honestly, I mean, Sally will tell you how that bothered me. They know how stubborn I am, too, about those things, just those things. So I think one of the takeaways I had is that, again, just for a brief time, this was just a brief time, I was able to identify a little bit, just a little bit, with people who live every day with chronic pain and get up and go through their day and do it with bravery and courage and humor, and what respect I have for those folks, and how much, when I come upon folks or know folks who live with chronic pain, the affection I feel for them and the respect I feel for them. So that was an unexpected takeaway, but it stays with me. It's important for me anyway.
I think all of us do transitions in life differently. There are a lot of transitions we make that need to be examined. Those are moments of where you make decisions about who you are going forward. A transition from working for 40 years in the same profession, doing the same thing, and then Marlin's brother coming up to me and saying, I think you're done. Actually, Tony was working with our church at the time, helping us to do what we thought would take place in a few years. And after spending some time with me, not with the congregation necessarily, his reflection to me and Stephanie was, I think you're done. Which led me into, and I knew I was done. I was hanging on, you know. I was 67. I thought I could hang in there a little bit longer, but I was tired. And I hadn't been able to listen to the fatigue in my life. I hadn't been able to listen to the sort of distress which comes from recognizing that what you're doing is finished, and that you'd have to reinvent yourself in a whole new way. When you've spent your entire life with people looking at you and expecting to hear something from you, and then going to sit in the pew and to listen to someone else and to change that whole environment, those are all transitions that a lot of clergy, and this church has a lot of clergy, ex-former, I guess you're never ex, you're just not working in a paid capacity anymore. We all transition, and we all transition differently, no matter what your employment is. So my takeaway has always been that it's been difficult for me to make transitions. To continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results meant that I needed to do things differently. What are the transitions I take to today? One is that I'm much more attentive to people and friends and family as they too walk through transitions. Most of all, I want to be able to give people space to do their own work, maybe with a guided question along the way to help them process what is internally happening inside of each of us as we transition from who we were to who we are now becoming. And I think we do that all the time. I'm in the middle of another transition. I know I'm only 73, and how many more do I have left? But but we may have many more. And so part of the transitions that we experience is the beginning of loss of friendships through death, through retirement and moving to be with their children. So distance from people you've known and always walked with. Recognizing those continuous deaths of relationships, of what made me who Phil Doeschot was, is no longer who Phil Doeschot is. Those transitions take space, and I think that more than anything, I go back to the trail, or I go back to this will be the first year in several that we have not gone back, and there are some reasons for that, and if you want to know those, I'm glad to share them with you. That we won't be going back to the trail in November, but we'll go back, I think, because we're always on a pilgrimage, and for me, the pilgrimage has always been about the work that we have to do in order to make the move from one thing to another. That's just my trend. That's just my way of dealing with it. There's something about walking. If you've never walked significantly, there's something about walking. Is it the mantra of the steps? Those of you who walk, there's something about the that really, it's incredibly creative. If you've preached and found yourself stuck, to go out for a walk have been ways. If you get stuck on an issue, to go out and walk has always been a way of sort of blocking or unblocking the creative path or the blinders that you have inside your eyes. Walking has a way of sort of opening up the channels for things to occur. I'm not sure what the Holy Spirit does in the middle of that thing. I think those of us in the Reformed tradition are really at arm's length with the Holy Spirit at best. I mean, we love Jesus. We think God is the Creator is kind of cool. And we think the Holy Spirit may be a little spooky. But we love it, but we just don't know what to do because of our traditional ways of approaching that. And I think that the journey of pilgrimage is a journey with the Spirit of God, unlike anything else we in the Reformed tradition do. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you. These were richer and deeper reflections than I dared to hope for. Thank you for sharing these. I want to follow up on Suzanne's comment. I am a deeply compassionate pastor, but I am capable of serious judgment about other people. And that was one of my interior lessons on this walk. I think the Spanish word for pilgrim is peregrino. So in my little circle of people who did the Camino the right way, we referred to others as touragrinos. They were the ones who had their backpacks delivered to the next stop. Anyway. And the funny, shameful thing is that I recognized this in myself as I was having the thought. So anyway, there was a great deal of interior work to be done as we walked. Thanks for laughing, by the way, but it's not funny. Well, we have time, so please ask away. And we have microphones.
All of you talk about pilgrimage as walking. So my question is, can one have a pilgrimage without walking? I'm thinking of an experience that Hope Church had in 2012 in the celebration of the 150th anniversary of this congregation. And we had a trip planned through Witty Travel to go to the East Coast and travel up and down the Hudson, so to speak, and reestablish contacts with churches and people who had been formative in the development of Hope Church 150, over the 150 years. Does that qualify as a pilgrimage or not?
No, absolutely not. No, would anybody like to respond to that? Please.
Well, I've been on a pilgrimage with Marlin, and he would say to us at the beginning of those 2 weeks in Israel, this is not a typical pilgrimage. But it was a pilgrimage. It's going back in order to continue to move forward. I think that, yeah, so I see pilgrimages, I think there's a writer, a Canadian guy, who wrote the book, The Power of Now. Some of you may be familiar with his work. And he says, you know, you live in the past or you live in the future, but the power of life is living in the now. I think I agree with that, but I do know that there are some things which occur in pilgrimages. And one is that it's really difficult to live into the future because that's a world you don't know, and it's just filled with fear and trepidation and anxiety for which you couldn't have imagined what it is. So I think for me, I've stopped trying to live into the future, but I do live in the past because there are lessons that I didn't learn as I walked there that I need for the present. And I think you invited us into that kind of pilgrimage when we were in Israel. Steph and I spent 2 weeks in India on an unexpected pilgrimage. I was there for the adventure. She was there to work. And we wandered into a place called, it'd be like Graceland, which we all think of, Land of Grace. And these people had waited all day for us to arrive. And they told the story of the Reformed Church in America coming. And for many of them were Dalits and who had been bought by monies the Reformed Church had made to set them free and had given them land in that place, and they called it Graceland. And we're sitting there as Reformed Church in America pilgrims, literally, in a place that we had nothing to do with but feeling the incredible presence of our ancestors almost, well, it was ooey, weirdy kind of thing, moment, sacred kind of moment of just hearing what they did and we're getting the credit for it. It was just, it wasn't real. But you're right. I think pilgrimages are sometimes, but they're only pilgrimages in my mind, is if you're doing some of the work. They're not, else they're just vacations. They're just travels, and lots of people travel without ever their life never changes.
Forgive me if I didn't hear this earlier when it may have been covered, and this is kind of piggybacking off Judy's question. Can you answer for me, what to you is a pilgrim? I hear the word pilgrimage a lot, but can we go back and look more at the roots of what is a pilgrim? And in thinking about that, it might in part answer Judy's question too. Then what is a pilgrimage?
You're looking at me. There's a line from Augustine's Confession. I think Confessions. It occurs very early in the book about our hearts being restless until they rest in Thee. I mean, that notion of life is the one that I live with. So in a sense, all of life is, I think that's how Augustine saw it. All of life, in a sense, is a pilgrimage. If that's a helpful way of thinking about it for you, that it has been for me. Anyone have a different take on that?
I think there has to be intentionality, if that's helpful. I mean, I spent a lot of days just wandering through them, and at the end there was nothing that happened to my soul. I think pilgrimages are, when Marlin and Sully just sat down with Steph and I and said, hey, you want to go on the Camino? We said, yeah. And then we thought about it and said, no. 500 miles? But we said yes to pilgrimage, but we said no to 500 miles. We said yes to, a pilgrim is yes to intentionality. I'm going to do this intentionally. I think that's Pilgrim's Progress. Yeah, maybe other people have thought about this more than me.
I just, in response to that, then, is a pilgrimage a means to an end rather than the end itself? In other words, maybe it doesn't really matter that you cover all 500 miles without a backpack on. Maybe it is going on a tour of the East Coast. That's another means to the end. In other words, time with yourself, self-examination, yes, rebirth of your soul, how you want to identify it.
Last week I started with a slide based on a book by Phil Castanow called The Art of the Pilgrimage, and he made a distinction between travel and pilgrimage, or vacation and pilgrimage. And sometimes it's important to get away and to sit on a beach and read a book with our toes in the sand, and I understand that. That's not purposeful, well, maybe it is in a sense, but it's not the way we think of purposeful travel. So Castanow suggests that pilgrimage has more intention behind it. It's where we go to spend time with ourselves and deal with the issues that we need to deal with. That's been a helpful distinction for me. But I certainly get the need for travel and getting away from everything. I wouldn't call that pilgrimage, though.
Going back to 2012, with the trip that the Hope Church persons made, I would say, looking back at that, because I've had some conversation with some of those people since last week who wondered about this question. And unlike some of the things that people have said in terms of internal change, I would say for many of us, it was a group experience that solidified. Microphone on the bus with story after story being told of people's lives and people's experiences. And there were a lot of things like that happened that really brought the group together in a new way. And to this day, people still say, oh, that was one of the best trips I ever took. And I think that's for me, that sounds like pilgrimage.
To me, too.
I just wanted to say, I kept thinking as I was listening this whole time, just how profound and inspirational. Like, I want to exercise more, and also I want to think about it, but I think it might even be that you can start out on something and not know it was a pilgrimage. And so this last week I was in New York, and before my new knees, I was having great difficulty walking. But I got new knees last year. And in the old days, I used to walk all the time in New York City. And I went by subway all the way down to the end to see the Statue of Liberty for a number of reasons. And I started walking north, like in the old days. And I thought, well, I know I can kind of go north. Maybe I'll get a subway or the buses. I love the buses. And after a while, it was very difficult and painful, and I thought, oh, I'm on the wrong bus route, and I just kept going, and the numbers got small. I was headed towards 66. I got, 26, and I thought, okay, how much is that? And then so I thought I could walk a couple more blocks, and then I started looking for the buses again, because it was really difficult, and I finally got to about 56, and I thought, I can make it to 66th. And I got there. I did have to have a recovery day, but I think that it got me over a hump about whether my new knees were going to work, because there have been some questions. And I think at the end, I kind of went into the hotel room with like, so maybe it changes.
I used to teach this in Taiwan sometimes, and I think we could all use it here. Microphone technique. Point the thing at your mouth. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, David. And thank all of you. Yes, this has been a very rich conversation and deeply appreciated. I'm sure many of us will be talking further about it today as well in some of our conversations. But thank you all very much for sharing today. Just a quick question. I know in the United States that there is some question about the care of the AT and the condition of various places on the AT today. Of course, and as national parks are shut down right now, some concern about that. But on the, also on the Camino, do the trekkers help care for the path? Is that, or who takes care of these paths? Who makes sure the yellow marks are there?
Yeah, that's a great question because we saw some messes along the way, but it's the same way in Israel-Palestine, by the way. You know, we talk about how certain people love that land and how important that land is to them, and not just, I'm not just talking about Jewish now, I'm talking about Palestinian as well. And then like Sally and I, who hiked the whole thing, you know, we did a 26-night hike from the top, from the north all the way down to the south in Israel, and to go in Palestine, West Bank, all of that. And then to see the messes in their parks. I mean, you wonder then what really is valued. And the same thing was on the Camino. Was it kept neat and clean? Yes, somebody was doing that for some of it, but other parts of it were not cared for, and that was the trekkers who were leaving their toilet paper, and they weren't picking up their toilet paper, just leaving it in, you know, so I think that's a metaphor for us. It's not just about, because pilgrimage is life. Life is a journey. If you're thinking about the end, never mind about that. The end, it's the walk. It's the journey. We miss life because we're thinking about the end, what we have to accomplish, what we have to do, what we have to gather, how successful was I, all of that stuff that messes us up. The thing about doing a 500-mile walk with no breaks is you get to leave that all behind for a while, and all that matters is one foot in front of the other and the companions on the way. That's it. Nothing else matters. And then I'll finish. Sorry, I'm preaching. I apologize. But it, you know, we have the same thing going on now with care for the planet. So we can talk about not caring for the trails. We're fouling our own nest on our journey. And so it's a bigger question than just who cares for these trails. Who's caring for the whole thing? You know, these are the things when you walk out in nature, you get in touch with that and you begin to value that. I'll stop, but there's a deeper question than just who cleans the trails here for me, or what a pilgrimage is here for me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you,
It was
Jane.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Next week, I'll just quickly say Travis West will be here to talk about his latest book, The Sabbath Way, which you know we are studying in the month of October. So books are out in the gathering area if you want to participate. Haven't picked one up yet. There's also bookmarks, if you're not aware, that have the reading schedule on them for the month of October. So that's available out in the gathering area. But Travis West will be here next week. And thank you. Thank you. I do too. Yes, I meant to point that out.